can feel and hear the bullets from a sniper like cracking over my head.
Sniper fire.
Yeah.
Wow. He's trying to take you out.
He's trying to take me out. And right next to me, unfortunately, the commander was hit in the neck by him and told like right out the back. They did everything they could to save his life. And I just remember this thought popping through my head of like Coach was saying, don't get hit because then you can't play football.
While sniper bullets are whizzing by your head, you're thinking about playing football at UT?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first time I came here, I picked up in a taxi from the airport. He picks me up and sees me in the uniform and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" He said, "Have you ever been to Austin before?" And I said, "No, I've never been. I've heard great things about it." And he goes, "Oh, you're going to love it. Cowboys smoke pot and all the hippies carry guns." And I was like, 15 years later, that is one of the best ways to describe Austin.
How did these experiences fighting in the war, how did that change the rest of your life? We're here today in Austin, our first Austin edition of the Power Pots podcast. Very excited to be here. With me here today is, I'm going to call him the Renaissance man, Nate Boyer, who many of you have probably seen in different areas that we're going to talk about today that he's done through his life, and that's led him here today. Nate, thank you for coming today.
Oh, my honor. Thanks for having me.
Very excited to have you. So where do you live in these days?
Oh, man. I'm based here, but I'm on the road quite a bit. I'm kind of all over the place, but I'm based here in Austin. Look, I'm not from here, but I came here in 2010 to go to school and to play ball and all that. And I kind of just always kept a foot in Austin ever since, everything that's sort of happened the last 15 years, which has been, well, not just in my life, I just mean in the world. But yeah, Austin's is definitely a special place to me. And, I remember the first time I came here, I was coming to look at the school. I was, dress uniform in the military. And I got picked up in a taxi from the airport. This is before Uber and all that. And so taxi drivers are usually characters, kind of good personality. This guy picks me up and sees me in the uniform and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I want to go to college. I think I'm finally ready." I was 29 years old at the time. And he said, "Well, have you ever been to Austin before?" And I said, "No, I've never been. I've heard great things about it." And he goes, "Oh, you're going to love it. All the cowboys smoke pot and all the hippies carry guns." And I was like,
that's right.
That's a good, and 15 years later, that is one of the best ways to describe Austin. Honestly, It is an interesting mix. It's keep Austin weird for a reason.
It is. And so as I understand it, you grew up in the Bay Area. Is that right?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay. I was born in Tennessee. My dad was going to veterinary school at University of Tennessee. My mom was an engineer. She was working out at Oak Ridge National Lab. And when I was very young, though, like 2 years old, we moved out there to the Bay, to a city called El Cerrito, kind of on the East Bay, across the Bay Bridge from San Francisco, and like kind of between Berkeley and Richmond, which are very different places as well. But yeah, from there, then moved to Southern California a little after high school for a bit until eventually joining the military. But
from what I know about your life, there's certain chapters we're going to talk about today. There's the military chapter, there's the athletic chapter, then there's the charity chapter, and then there's the acting production chapter. Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
Describe that?
Totally.
Okay. Well, what an interesting...
I feel like the chapter, I don't even know what chapter I'm technically in right now, but they're starting to overlap a little bit. But yeah, you're right. I think every 4 or 5 years, I feel like definitely a different page is turning.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting life, which we're going to talk about. So growing up in the Bay Area, how did you end up getting inspired to go into the military at all?
It wasn't something I genuinely considered growing up. Look, both my grandfathers served in World War II, and that was cool to me, but I never really asked them much about it. I didn't know too much about it, and I didn't have immediate family necessarily in the military. My parents didn't serve, aunts and uncles didn't. I wasn't really around it. And then also it was the time, we were sort of coming out of the Cold War and before the global war on terror. So yes, there was a, Desert Storm in there and sort of the Gulf War, a small part of that. But I think that dictated it somewhat, that just it wasn't, it dictated it not being something that was at the forefront of my mind. I just wasn't around it, and it wasn't so much in the news and stuff like that. So yeah, so growing up, it wasn't that I was, unpatriotic or anything. I just didn't think it was really an option. And both my parents too, who I was very fortunate. I had awesome parents that were very hardworking and put themselves through school and then graduate school. So it's not that they were deterring me from the military, but I saw that, and I think the expectation was, this is probably a similar path that you're going to go on, because my dad's a racehorse veterinarian. My mom's an environmental engineer. It's a lot of, there's, 18, 20 years of college between the two of them. My mom got her PhD at UC Berkeley, which is a really tough school to, get your PhD in anything in, but she got that in environmental science. And So it never really crossed my mind until I was in my early 20s, really. And, I left the nest and I didn't go straight to college. I took some firefighting classes and then I started working on a fishing boat down in San Diego, and I was making pretty good money. And I was just like, I don't know what I would study. And I don't know, maybe college isn't for me at all. And then I ended up moving up to Los Angeles at 19, interested in film and TV. And a year after that is when 9/11 happened. So that definitely shifted, I mean, a lot of people's perspective. It changed a lot of people's lives and all that. So that was what kind of started that process of thinking this is something I may want to do.
So everyone knows the movie Green Beret with John Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
This old movie. Yeah. And that's probably what all people know about who the Green Berets are. So can you tell us who the Green Berets are, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point because, I mean, Hollywood, in probably any sector of anything, any microcosm, they certain images that pop in our head because we've seen that film or, maybe read that book or whatever. So it was, it's John Wayne and the Green Berets. It's John Rambo. In Rambo, he's a Green Beret.
Okay.
And it's the A-Team. They're Green Berets.
Wow, okay.
And all really cool.
Yeah.
But definitely not, I'm not going to say it's an inaccurate depiction. It's just not the whole story. So a lot of the Special Forces mission, what the Green Berets do. So for those that don't know, it's Green Beret is sort of a slang term because that's what we wear on our head. And it's actually, the Special Forces is actually its only army. Special Operations encompasses a lot more. But when you talk about Special Forces, that is the Army, and the Special Forces soldiers, we wear Green Berets. Sort of the meat and potatoes of the mission, which is also very vague. It's called unconventional warfare, what we do. So okay, what does that mean? First of all, what's conventional and then what's unconventional? It can mean a million different things. But really what the focus is, and it started in Vietnam mostly, and it was small teams, 12-man teams that were going into certain regions that were often, dangerous or working with trying to develop sort of brotherhoods and alliances with, paramilitary groups or whatever, focused on a common goal that we have. So in that case, of course, we were, fighting against the Viet Cong. And so we've got these small teams that are embedding with, Vietnamese soldiers that they're fighting alongside, and they're training them all the while and then conducting missions with them. And sometimes that means you're wearing the same clothes as them and trying to, as much as you can, assimilate, not just to the culture, but really, fit in so you can conduct these operations that are maybe still large scale in some way, but not visible. You know what I mean? Not visibly large scale. And a lot of what that developed into was something we call foreign internal defense. So no matter where we go in the globe, a Special Forces team, maybe just a 12-man team, will go to a region, go to a country, link up with, I'll give you a great example, right after 9/11. And a movie depicted this. It's called, the book was called Horse Soldiers. The movie's called 12 Strong. And these guys, these 12 Green Berets, they went in on horseback and they linked up with, warlords and, different tribal leaders and sort of built this military.
I remember that.
Yeah, to kind of fight back. And so that foreign internal defense is like going to this place, learning, maybe you don't know the full language and you've got interpreters and all that, but trying to learn as much as you can about the cultures and customs and speak at least a little bit of the language as quick as you can. And then, we're going to work together and sort of train a military, kind of develop a military to fight back. And so that's a lot of what unconventional warfare, looks like in a lot of ways. But that's really what, and the military at large, conventional units have really adopted that over the 20-year war in Afghanistan and Iraq, So it's a lot more, I think, common now and sort of a practice that was sort of passed on and other units are using that train, advise, assist, methodology. But it really did start with the Special Forces and almost I'm going to say 70, 75 years ago, something like that is really when it all began.
And so did you pick the Green Berets? You said, I want to be a Green Beret, and you went in after it. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't join right after 9/11. But it got me thinking about it. And like I said, I didn't go to school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was interested in the film and TV stuff, and that's what brought me to Los Angeles, but I didn't really pursue it. Honestly, I didn't really know how to work hard yet. I hadn't developed that muscle, and I grew up playing sports and I loved it. Baseball and basketball were the two that I really played the most of. And so I knew how to work a bit, but not really how to sacrifice. You really sacrifice time and a lot of things. If you want to be great at anything, that's just what's required. And then, a couple years after 9/11, it's like my friends are all graduating college and starting their lives and sort of on some sort of a path, at least an idea of what they want to do and who they want to be. And I wasn't there yet, it just took me longer. And I started traveling. I was saving my money up, just working odd jobs. And I would go, backpacking through Europe or Central America, kind of common for, person in their early 20s that's just trying to figure it out and see the world a bit.
Yeah.
But what was lacking was a sense of a purpose and like meaning behind it. And I felt like I wasn't really contributing in any way except for maybe learning and having a good time, right? Seeing some really cool stuff, experiencing things. But I was like, it's not a good feeling to have that when you think if I wasn't around, the world would be spinning just fine. They wouldn't, not that I'm going to change the world in that manner, but if you feel like you don't really have an impact at all, it's just not fun, and that's kind of how I felt in my early 20s. And it ended up leading me I went to the Darfur in Africa, which is, it's a region along the Chad and Sudanese border. And at the time, and it's still an ongoing civil war for years and years and years.
How did you pick that mission? Like, how did that come about?
I woke up on my buddy's couch after way too many of these. And on the coffee table was this Time magazine. And on the cover was this woman holding child in her arms. And they were extremely malnourished. And it just said the tragedy in Sudan. And I started flipping through and reading about what was going on there. And the Janjaweed militia was kind of going through these villages and murdering all the men and then, raping and pillaging and just horrible stuff. And all because, they believed something slightly different, and it was just, I don't know. I think it just kind of woke me up a bit, realizing that this unfortunately is pretty common in a lot of the world. And not that things are perfect here, but it's a different level of oppression, I think.
And how old were you at the time?
I just turned 23.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 23. And so I'm like, these images were just hitting me, the photographer is named James Knockway. I've never met him. I don't know if he's still with us, but I would like to one day. But anyway, I was just like reading about it then after looking at the pictures, and it was, they're understaffed at these refugee camps and they need help. So I started calling all these NGOs saying, hey, I want to volunteer with your organization. I'll fly myself over there. I just want to help. And they were like, you don't have a college degree. You're not a doctor. Like, what do you, And I'm like, well, you're understaffed. I mean, I've worked construction. I've done all kinds of things. I know there's a need and there's something I could do to be helpful. And they were like, well, it's a lot more complicated than that. It takes time. And
well, I'm sure they're like, who's this dude calling up?
Exactly.
Like, come over here, a 23-year-old kid.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go and figure it out when I get there.
Okay.
And that was a big step because doing that, as I looked back on it later, sort of realizing it was, in a sense, my first special forces mission because I'm on my own. I'm not doing anything technically illegal, but it's definitely unconventional.
Yeah, definitely unconventional.
And so I went to, we didn't buy flights online. I went to the AAA in Burbank and bought a plane ticket. And then I had to get a visa and I drove down to the consulate and applied for this 60-day visa to Chad, the neighboring country. You couldn't fly to Sudan because it was a war. But the camps were being built just across the border in Chad anyway. So I got all the things I needed and then I flew over there and kind of just BS'd my way onto a UN flight, just talking around stuff. And there was an empty seat. They put me on it, flew out to the camps, got interrogated, They definitely, at that point, were like, well, who is this? Who is this guy? What are you doing here? Obviously, I don't have any weapons. My bag had like, a change of socks and boxer shorts and malaria pills and a toothbrush. And that was about it, So they were like, okay, well, he's here. Let's put him to work. And so they put me to work. And those 2 months volunteering changed my life completely because, first of all, the amount of gratitude from those people, that was just like, we would leave a place like here and go over there. But also, I kind of developed a stronger sense of patriotism there because they really looked up to this place, They always asked me about America and life back here and all that. And so I was like, still not thinking about the military genuinely, but that sense of adventure and the purpose behind it, really the purpose more than anything. If not,
Sounds like it was a big turning point in your life.
Huge turning point.
Yeah.
Huge turning point.
Kind of set your life down that path of seeking adventure, new things, helping people.
Yeah.
That sort of a thing. Would that be right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It just felt like, I felt like I belonged there in a weird way. I remember laying down one night. So we were just sleeping, just sleeping on the ground under a mosquito net and like looking up at the stars and just thinking like, this is in the weirdest way possible. I didn't even know about this place 2 weeks ago and now I'm here and this is where I'm meant to be. And not just this place specifically, but doing stuff like this. And so the last week I was there, I was heading back to the capital because I needed to fly out. My visa was running out and I got malaria and really sick, like COVID 10X, and this local family put me up. They wouldn't take anything from me. I didn't have much to give, but to them, a little bit's a lot. And they had a compound. It was all just these mud huts and, different family members lived in different parts. And there was an empty, it was one, or maybe it wasn't empty and I kicked kick somebody out of their room. I don't know. But they put me up in there, just had a little cot for the bed, and they put a radio next to me so I had something to listen to. And the only station that came through was BBC News, and I was listening to the play-by-play, essentially, of the Second Battle of Fallujah.
Oh, wow.
And it was the Marines who were the main effort in that. But, they interviewed a couple. I mean, these guys are 19 years old, and risking their lives and doing all this stuff. And it just, obviously I hadn't been to war from what I just experienced, but it was in a similar region. And I think that, I don't know, it just clicked. That's the next thing.
So you said something earlier. You said that in your early 20s, you started thinking about if you disappeared today, that no one would notice, basically. It wouldn't have any impact on the world. And I got to tell you, most people don't think that way, especially in the early 20s. So where did that come from? Like, who put that in you as you were growing up? The feeling of duty and service that you have?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a quick answer for that. I think watching my parents was a big one. I know that's maybe cliche, but they just worked so hard and they showed up for everything they could for me, my brother and sister. And we didn't always have a lot. Like starting out, I remember when we first moved to California, we had this tiny little house and 3 of us kids were in 1 bedroom, and we had 5 of us sharing a bathroom. And not that people don't live in much tougher situations, not only in America, but all over the world, but they never complained. They just worked. And then somehow, their entire social life was revolving around their 3 kids. And that's the sacrifices they made, you know what I mean? And so I think that was a big thing, a big part of it. So a lot of it was just family. I think also a lot of my heroes who were maybe characters in movies or athletes.
I was going to ask about that. Who were growing up, who were your role models that you looked to, like whether they're athletes or movie stars or leaders, politicians, whatever?
Yeah. I grown up in the Bay, and the 49ers were an absolute dynasty at the time. Yeah. Favorite players were Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott. Those were the posters I had on my walls, right? And then, the movie, I loved adventure type movies, right? I loved Indiana Jones, that series. And that's like not made for kids really, but I just
sense of adventure,
that sense of adventure. Yeah. But also, there's like an element of grit to those type of characters, that I just kind of gravitated towards that type of stuff. And I not being a great athlete, but loving sports and kind of having to really work hard and having to, be the 6th man on the basketball team or whatever that looks like, kind of make those sacrifices, get the guy that gets the hustle award, from the coach, because you're not necessarily an all league player, but it is recognized. I think, I don't know, those kind of characters and athletes are the ones that I really aspired to be like. So I think a lot of it was.
So one of my favorite movies is Lone Survivor. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Are those Green Berets in that movie?
Navy SEALs.
Navy SEALs. Okay.
Yeah, it's Marcus Luttrell's story.
Yeah. And at the beginning of that movie, there's that actual footage of Navy SEAL training. Do you remember that, where they're out freezing in the ocean in San Diego, I believe, right? So what was Green Beret training like compared to that?
Way harder. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All in good fun. No, they actually, Peter Berg, who directed that movie, that's who I did my internship with after Texas to finish my master's degree. Yeah, which was cool. But yeah, no, it's their training is much more water related. Obviously, in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's not really waterborne operations going on. So they weren't doing underwater demolitions like they're doing in a lot of the BUDS training out in Coronado. But yeah, they're both very challenging. I guess I've never done SEAL training, so I don't really want to speak to it too much. As far as some of the differences anyway, I know we have a big emphasis on like land navigation, a lot of that stuff we're sort of doing on our own. We'll be with a rucksack and a compass and a map and protractor, and you got to basically find stakes in the ground.
Well, I heard you have to live in the wilderness for a certain period of days without any support.
Yeah, well, we do. We both have our version of SEER training, which stands for survival, evasion, resistance, and escape.
Okay.
And the first week of that is survival, So for us, we're out in the woods, and some of it we're by ourselves, some of it we link up with a couple other people. And then eventually you get captured and you got to go through a POW simulation.
So did you have food, water?
No. You got to just, they give you these little iodine tablets. So if you do find some water, you at least can sanitize it in some way. But no, you got to forage for food. I went in February too, so there's not a lot growing.
What does forage for food mean?
Forage for food, we're just like basically trying to find it wherever we can.
Like in the wilderness?
Yeah, in the woods. Yeah.
Worms and stuff.
Yeah, I ate termites.
What?
I ate a mouse. I ate two snakes, 2 little rat snakes, and that was pretty much it.
Were you hungry enough to do that?
I was was very hungry.
Like how many days did you do this without food?
I don't remember the exact number, but the better part of a week. I mean, it's a good amount, Wow. And then you got we would go down, there'd be little creeks you'd find, right? So you collect water there. And I remember going down there one time and I saw a shell and I was like, oh, there's going to be something in that shell to eat. And there was a little, I don't know if it was a river mussel or what it was. It almost looked like a little mussel or a clam or something. It was tiny. So I started digging in the mud and collecting these. And I'm in my camouflage and I've got, camo paint on and everything like that. And we're not on a base. We're out near a base, but it's in the middle of the sticks in North Carolina. And all of a sudden I look up and there's a little rowboat coming down with these two fishermen. And I was like, dang it. Because if you get caught, it's not good. And I didn't know if they were cadre or what. And so they're floating by and I just kind of freeze, hoping they don't see me. And they saw me and they row over to the shore and they're sorry, I'm just out here doing some survival training. They're like, oh yeah, we know the course and stuff out here. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, do you guys have any food by chance? And they're like, we don't, unfortunately, but we do have a bottle of Crown. Do you want a shot?
What?
Yeah. So I had a shot of Crown.
That's awesome.
Held me over for at least a few hours, I mean, It was the strongest buzz I've ever had off one sip.
Right.
But yeah, it's I don't know, moments like that you kind of remember, throughout the training. But it's very tough. I mean,
sleep deprivation.
Yeah, sleep deprivation, not a ton of food. When we go through the POW simulation, you're so tired and out of it, and they do such a good job. The cadre, the role players, it feels real at times.
Wow.
You're just so out of your mind. And really the number one, the reason people don't make it is they quit because it is hard. And
I was going to ask you about that. How many people make it through Green Beret training versus what's the percent of quitters?
I don't know the total percent from beginning to end. I know in my basic training class, there was about 145 of us that had the 18 X-ray contract, as it was called at the time, where basically we tested high enough to be able to go straight from basic training to airborne school to pre-selection and then to special forces selection. And then if you make it through that, a 1.5 year long training to be a Green Beret. And I think 11 of us made it all the way through at a 145.
What?
And one of the big...
That's less than 10%.
Yeah. One of the big ones that gets people is selection, because that's the SEALs, they have Hell Week or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Special Forces selection. I was actually just out there, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago. Last week. No, I was out there last week at Camp McCall and got to make this selection announcement to those that did make it.
Okay.
And spent some time out there. And so the sergeant major there was a guy that I served with now. And he brought me out. He's like, you got to come see what we're doing and all this. And I go in there and I look up at in the office, their ops center. I look up in the wall and it's got the number of attendees and the number that are selected, right? And I think there's a common theme, maybe globally, maybe nationally these days, that it's a lot more participation trophies and we're kind of lowering the standards. And I think people have a general misconception about the military at large that just anybody can join and they just target the weak and all that. And while, look, it's an opportunity to go to college, pay for college, for instance, and other things like that, they certainly don't do that because I think only about 1 out of 3 young people coming out of high school even qualify for the military generally.
Yeah.
Because you do have to have, a certain level.
Right.
But beyond that, for something like Special Forces, it's even tougher, right? And the attrition rates are still as high and they will not lower the standards. And there's been people in high places that have been like, well, I know we need more Green Berets. Why don't we look at changing in there? Just no, we're not going to do that because that is a slippery slope. You start doing that and then it's like a cancer, it spreads throughout the force there. And it's just we have, defense is very important to us and we do a lot of, whether you agree with it or not, fighting for those that can't fight for themselves is a big part of what we do. And we do a lot of good in the world.
So when you made it through, did you ship out immediately?
No. Well, so made it through you're talking about to go deploy?
Yeah.
Overseas?
Yes.
No. So I didn't go immediately. I made it all the way through and I went first to Okinawa, Japan for a bit, and then went and did some more training and then eventually went to Iraq with my team out of Colorado. And that's what I wanted to do. That's why I joined. I wanted to deploy.
Right.
I wanted to go to Iraq. I wanted to go to Afghanistan.
The war's still going on then.
Yeah, this was in 2000. See, I graduated the Q course end of 06. So really in 07, I was preparing for that. 08 and 09, I was in Iraq.
So was training or combat harder?
Training was harder in the sense of, I guess, the physical exertion, right? And the feeling like you want to quit at times.
Right.
Combat was tougher in the sense of fear and the complication of the mission and the reality of war and how tough that is, right? And I think that that's a different type of challenge. It's a different type of
What was the most intense experience you had in combat over there?
I think, honestly, my last deployment, I went to Iraq early on, and then eventually after that, I came here to college and I transitioned into the Texas National Guard. And so I was still in the Special Forces, but I was also a full-time student. And then in the summers, I would go overseas. And it's funny, I was just, Mac Brown's here, was just talking with him in the lobby about that. And I remember going into his office and having to tell him or ask him really, hey, I want to try out for the long snapping position when I get back, but I'm about to go to Afghanistan, is that a possibility? And he's like, just don't lose a hand,
Right.
We need you. And I was only there for about 3.5 months. But the last week I was there, we had a mission. We were supposed to go into this village that hadn't troops go there in quite a while. And we're going with Afghan commandos as well, like their version of sort of Rangers, Special Forces. And we went this valley that no one had been in a long time. There was a lot of high value targets that are sort of amassing there. It's
like Taliban?
Safe haven. Yeah, exactly. And so we get in there as soon as we sort of pull into this village, we start getting mortared and fired upon and all this. And I ended up on the tailgate of one of the vehicles on the 240, the machine gun. And so I'm trying to lay down suppressive fire while we're moving troops, and a lot of them are Afghan troops, throughout trying to clear the village and trying to get the guys that we're going after. And I can feel and hear the bullets from a sniper cracking over my head.
Sniper fire.
Yeah.
Wow.
And hitting the vehicle I was in.
So he's trying to take you out.
He's trying to take me out. And right next to me, unfortunately, the captain, their commander, was hit in the neck by him and killed like right out the back. The first two people that were on the scene trying to save his life were Americans, which was, you know, I mean, that's just how it is. Like I said, it becomes this brotherhood.
Yeah.
So they did everything they could to save his life. And I just remember this thought popping through my head of like what coach was saying, you know, of like, well, don't get hit because you can't play football. It's like the weird things like that. It wasn't even so much that I was thinking about my mortality. It was a scary situation, but it was like thinking about like what I got to do next. I got to come back to the States.
So while you're firing this off, while sniper bullets are whizzing by your head, you're thinking about playing football at UT?
Yeah, just weird stuff kind of runs through your mind.
Is it kind of a surreal experience?
It's very surreal. It's very surreal.
Yeah.
Being in a gunfight, there's like nothing else. But it's also like the adrenaline with it and just the willingness of everybody else around you, like knowing that they would take a bullet for you. And
well, you stood in that vulnerable position, did your duty while this guy's trying to kill you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing.
It goes back to your question about training though. And like the training is very challenging and they put a lot of responsibility on you. And their expectation is that, you know, no matter what, you're not going to quit. And also it's all about the man on your left and right. It's all about them.
Yeah.
And so those flashes of thinking about the football stuff were, you know, in the midst of this whole thing where all I'm thinking about is like, how do I protect that squad over there that's about trying to go into that building? And how do I make sure that, you know, the vehicle ahead of us, they're not receiving fire or whatever. And, you know, I'm like looking out there trying to find muzzle flashes anywhere I can see them so that I can, you know, lay down fire in that way. And anyway, yeah, you just like, it happens super fast, but you do, you know, there's a quote about that. Like you sort of, you know, you fall to the level of your training. You don't rise to the level of your expectations. You know what I mean? And we train at a very high level. So for situations like that, so you don't have to think about what am I supposed to do here? You don't have time to do that anyway.
Yeah. That's amazing, man. How did these experiences like that, fighting in the war, how did that change the rest of your life in terms of discipline and fearlessness and things like that?
I would say, at least for me, it's not even a matter of fearlessness. I don't think it ever will be. I still fear a lot of things. I fear, you know, mortality in the sense of what does happen next? What does that look like? Those, you know, existential fears, I think. And also like, am I going to perform well? Whether I'm trying to make a movie or playing football or whatever, I do have that fear, but it's not so much for me about the absence of fear. It's just the recognition of it, which is actually a John Wayne quote. He says, courage is not the absence of fear. It's like essentially, you know, getting thrown off the horse and the willingness to get back on it.
Your ability to move through the fear.
Exactly.
Do your job or whatever it is.
It's like acknowledging it.
Yeah.
Acknowledging it for what it is a normal human emotion. It's a feeling that we have. But there's no better feeling than kind of recognizing that and still making the decision to go. Whether you win or lose, like the result isn't even the most important. It's just the fact that you didn't quit and you did the best that you could. That's one of those characteristics I developed, I guess. And it was like, because when I was coming out to go to college here at Texas, Texas and play football. I never played football before, and it was my favorite sport, but I never did it. And I had that regret, but also I was like, at the end of the day, if I get cut, life will go on.
So you were a long snapper, correct?
Yeah, I walked on as a safety, but started long snapping.
How did you pick long snapping, or did it pick you? How did that happen?
It picked me because it's a lack of athleticism at some level. Like, I made the team as a safety, but I wasn't getting on the field. I just didn't have the speed, you know? Ironically, when I was just out at that Special Forces selection, Michael Thompson, who I played with at Texas, he was a starting safety, played in the NFL for a bit. He just is finishing up Special Forces training.
Wow.
And so he remembered my time
He
here.
did it in reverse.
Yeah, he did in reverse. He did football, and then he tried doing something that he wasn't passionate about work-wise. He thought, this is what I'm supposed to do. And he missed the team. He missed the locker room. You know, he missed the camaraderie and all that stuff. And so now he's about to graduate and earn his Green Beret, which is really cool. But I think, definitely without the military, I never would have had the confidence to even try that. And my dad actually told me, he said, I think if you would have played as a younger man, I don't know if you would have tried out either, because you would have known how tough it was. You would have realized, like, this is crazy to go try and walk on a place like Texas. But I think, a little bit of naivety isn't the worst thing in the world, as long as you're preparing yourself and training and practicing. We can definitely talk ourselves out of stuff by reading too much into it or looking at stats and, what's the probability of me making this happen, without realizing that most of the people in life, most of attrition comes down to people just giving up. Whether they formally quit or they just stop performing, stop pouring every ounce of what they have into it. Like, that's usually where failure comes from. The rest of us that just stick it out, keep going, because this is what we want to do and we're passionate about it and we love it. At some point, it's going to work out, and it might not be what you envisioned. I envisioned being I wanted to play receiver or safety. But once I got to Texas, and once I went through a year of being on the scout team and was like, look, I'm going to get a little bit faster, a little bit stronger. I'll learn the game more. I'm just not, there's certain things gifts that I just wasn't given. So how else can let me take a step back, and how else can I still be part of this and contribute to this team? We can't all be the quarterback, because I wanted to play. I wanted to find a way on the field. And Coach Brown was like, I want you to be a voice in the locker room and a leader. And I said, if I'm not playing though, Coach, I feel like that's not my place.
Well, long snapping, they want you to do the same thing consistently, play after play after play. So it just takes lots of practice. So how much did you practice?
Yeah.
How was your discipline from the military an asset to you when you were practicing, learning to become a long snapper?
Well, I think, first of all, we do a lot of thankless jobs in the military. Not that people aren't grateful. People say thank you for your service all the time, and I know most of them mean it. But within our own ranks, like, there's just an expectation. You're just going to do that. And a lot of times it's not fun what you're about to do, but you're going to do it, you're going to do it well, or you're just not going to be a part of what we're doing. And so long snapping is a very thankless job. You can do it right 1,000 times in a row, nobody cares.
Right.
You screw up
once.
once.
Only when you screw up once, you get attention.
Yes. Your name's in the paper for all the wrong reasons. The way I learned to do it, the way I practiced, because I didn't have a coach, I utilized YouTube TV, and I was reading about different ways of doing it. And I asked the starting long snapper who was about to graduate, like, how do you grip the ball? And I just kind of watch him. And then, just like I was taught in the military to shoot a pistol, it was like we focused on grip and stance and taking it out of the holster 1,000 times before we ever put our finger on the trigger, right? And then how do we get it up here, the chest, and then as we're bringing it out, we're picking up the front sight picture and squeezing the trigger at the same time, and like all these little pieces that we practice. And then we put it all together over weeks. It was the same thing with long snapping. It was like I learned how to get that spiral just with my wrists. I'd lay on my back and snap it above my head, and then the stance, and then my sight picture, and then aim small, miss small. Those kind of mantras from the military translated to long snapping, and I started to build the pieces together, and then just having patience and knowing I was going to suck at it for probably a couple of months.
But did you just go to the park and do it over and over again?
I would go into the weight room in off hours, kind of sneak in there sometimes and do it there, or out on the field.
Just one after another.
When no one was there. Yeah, just 100 balls a day,
100 balls a day.
Yeah. And I just was thinking about it all the time and just became obsessed with it, and eventually started to get the hang of it. And then the other key to it was, now there's a lot of people that can do it, but can you do it in front of 100,000 people when the game's on the line? Because at the end of the day, it's the same. It's 15 yards, same snap, to the same, you want to get it in the same spot. It doesn't matter if it's first quarter, fourth quarter, blowout, right? 1 point game. It doesn't matter. The snap's the same, but it does matter because it affects us, and the moment gets to us. And that training from the military, from the deployment deployments, from all that stuff, from going through a shoot house and having cadre yelling at you and all this stuff. And you just got to like focus on your job, you know? All those things help me kind of block out the noise.
Well, it sounds like the military had a huge impact on your ability to master that. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah. And it's opened up for everything else. I got the film stuff, you know?
Let's talk about that. So you're an actor now, right?
Yeah.
You've been in 18, 19 films so far?
Something like that, yeah. Some TV shows and some small, very small stuff, and then some really big projects where I'm playing a real small part, but just being a part of it's awesome.
Yeah, Den of Thieves is a big production. You had a decent sized part in that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great movie. That director is Christian Gudigas is a good friend and great guy.
How does it work to work with Gerard Butler?
Great. I mean, he's a character, man. So these guys, we were just talking about McConaughey off camera before. All these guys are just, they're interesting people. That's why we like watching them in movies, because they're genuinely interesting people.
Exactly.
And that's how Gerard Butler is. You know, he's just he's a different cat. I remember going up to the premiere, and I had a date with me, and he comes up to me. I didn't even know he remembered who I was from filming because we barely crossed paths. And he comes up and he goes straight up to the girl, and I'm like, oh, he's going to hit on this girl. I'm like, all right, she's all yours, man. Like, what am I going to do? And he goes up and he just starts bragging on me. He knew my story.
Hey.
He knew I was just like,
and he's got that kind of Irish accent.
Exactly. Yeah. She still probably had a crush on him, but either way, it was just like, it was cool. I mean, these guys are different.
Yeah. So, acting also requires discipline, repetition, right? Consistency. I mean, did the same principles you applied to become a long snapper, did you use those to learn the skill of acting?
Definitely. I think big difference in acting versus playing football for me, for my position, was like in football, I was doing everything I could to block out all the noise and the distractions and the crowd. And I just want to like hone in on this very small thing, the right pocket of the punter, essentially, or the hand of the holder for a field goal extra point. It's like, I don't want anything else. But if you do that in acting, you're just going to be a robot. You have to like listen and be aware of everything around you and sort of let yourself be affected by all this stuff. So it's different in that way, but it also requires an intense amount of discipline, because with that, you still have to remember, these are my lines. This is what's happening in the scene. This is my role in the scene. Sometimes you're sort of meant to disappear into the background. Even if you have dialogue, you're not the star of the show just because you're saying the words at that point.
Right.
So like knowing your role, all that stuff, but it all absolutely applies. And also just like getting over the nerves. That's the biggest thing. I am a nervous person. People are just like, dude, you must be so confident all the time and all this. And I'm like, I feel that I'm capable of doing these things, but I still get extremely nervous and I'm worried and like the sky is falling and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of take a step back, take a breath, and I'm like, just enjoy this and do the best you can. If it doesn't work out, whatever. But once you got the role, or just like once you got the job, like you got it. Like there's nothing to be overly nervous about. Of course, nerves, I think, come from a place of wanting to perform and wanting to do well, whether it's for your teammates or for whatever. It comes from a good place.
Right.
It's just like anything else, they can overwhelm you, just like fear. It can overwhelm you, or you can just recognize it, maybe use it to your advantage.
Right.
And anyway, I think same with that. It was like that discipline and understanding you got to sacrifice your time and all of that. And more similar to combat in some ways, you need to keep your eyes open and very aware of everything going on and kind of listen to everything.
So is acting your main focus today?
I mean, I'd say filmmaking in general. Okay. I'm actually directing right now, in the middle of directing a D-Day 80th anniversary documentary, which has been amazing. We've been interviewing these guys that are over 100 years old, all over the country.
Yeah.
I mean, they've seen everything. And then they grew up in the Great Depression, and then they went.
My grandfather parachuted.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
He was a captain in the U.S. Army.
Do you remember, was he 101st or 82nd, or do you know which?
I think he's 82nd.
Yeah, 82nd. Yeah, so 82nd. 101st is the one that was kind of made famous by Band of Brothers, but 82nd Airborne, just a big apart. And they're based out of Fort Bragg, where we do our special forces training. But we interviewed one of those guys who, jumped into like St. Mary Glees, and it's sort of one of those little towns made famous over there.
So he's passed away now, but he gave me two things. He gave me a Nazi knife that he recovered somewhere over there. It's still in the sheath and everything with the Nazi emblem on it. And then he gave me about a 10-foot by 10-foot piece of his parachute.
Oh, wow.
It's camouflage, green camo parachute
that's cool.
Parachuted into France. And
I mean, I can't even imagine like some of the interesting, just basic knowledge on that. Like I didn't know a ton about it going in, even though they've made, Saving Private Ryan and all this, the story's been told, but to hear it from their perspective and then just kind of dig in and really understand that like we threw everything at that mission.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't successful, and we lost a lot of people, there. And then following on,
So have you been over to the beach over there?
Yeah, I was there.
So there's that first scene from Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
The opening the movie where
right.
he goes back and sees, burial of one of his brothers. Right?
Yeah.
So have you been to that spot over there?
Yeah, it's like Point Du Hoc is like where the Rangers climbed up. And it's the crazy part about that, if you go there physically and look at it, it's so steep. The rocks are insane. There's no way they could have filmed it because they filmed, I think they shot those scenes I think some of it was shot in England, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
In a similar looking thing, because there's no way Spielberg could have shot that with them coming off the rocks and had that work. But when you look at what they actually came up over, some of the Rangers there, and not all of them were right there. A lot of them were on either Omaha Beach or Utah Beach, like in the film, but it's crazy because not only are you climbing up these sheer cliffs with all this gear on, you're getting fired at by like tons of, Germans in these bunkers, and so many of you guys all around you are getting shot right off the rocks, and I mean, we lost thousands just in that day. And then after that, and then the Battle of the Bulge following up, which Band of Brothers sort of covers, like we just lost so many, but we had to win that battle. We had to take back France, or we'd all be speaking German now.
Absolutely.
I almost said Sprechen German, Sprechen Deutsch or whatever, but it's incredible. And the guys that are still alive, it's like I said, they're over 100. Some of them are incredibly sharp and remember everything. And, they were born in a time where few had electricity, and now like, look where we're at. It's just,
so how do people find this movie? When does it come out?
We don't know yet. Hopefully we're finishing it up, hopefully this summer, and then we'll put it, it'll be in festivals and stuff like that. So I'm thinking maybe ideally next year around D-Day, which is coming up again. The 81st anniversary is in, June 6th, and then next June. I think that would be sort of an ideal time.
Right.
So we'll see.
Right. You've also got a charity you started.
Yeah.
Foundation. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Emerging Vets and Players, MVP for short. Basically what we do is we bring together combat vets and former professional athletes, and we help them find purpose and identity when they lose a uniform. I was fortunate enough to spend time in both of those locker rooms, and the jersey and the camouflage, obviously different. The battlefield, the ball field, we would never compare that. And I don't think anybody genuinely would, but the loss of purpose when that's over, both of those careers ending at a pretty young age and feeling like you'll never be great again. All those things are very similar. And so some of our members from the athlete side, like Randy Couture is on our board, six-time heavyweight champion of the world in the UFC, Tony Gonzalez, maybe the greatest tight end to ever play. And then, they share their story, maybe went on multiple deployments, came back to a tough situation, struggled. Some of the guys we've had in our program spent time living in a homeless shelter. And you look at that person, you look at this other guy, and you're like, well, they don't have anything in common. This guy's, had a good life and wealthy and all this, and this guy's really hurting right now. And then they start talking and you realize the athlete's like, those things you're feeling, like I feel all of those things too. I was fortunate to have what I had. But this person feeling like they can relate to Randy Couture and Tony Gonzalez.
Well, they're young men,
very helpful.
But in very intense situations.
Yes.
Lots of attention on them, right?
Pressure.
Lots of adrenaline, pressure, fear. And then all of a sudden that all goes away, right? And they're normal per se, right? Right. And then
1% of them get to ride out on a white horse on their own terms, like the athletes. And I think people all imagine, well, they're all spoiled, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's just not the story for everyone. Even the ones that were first round draft picks. Vince Young's a great example. You know what I mean? Vince went through a lot, and he fought through a lot. And I know it was, tough. He came out and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with us a few years ago with a group of vets and athletes. And it's like, he's there on the mountain, talking to a veteran he's never met. And they're just that brotherhood, that understanding and mutual respect. They kind of look up to each other.
Right. Well, I asked him about you. He said, yeah, that's my brother. That's what he told me.
He's the best, man. Vince is, he's just different. Like people, they see the great athleticism, and the national championship and all that stuff. But he's just a regular dude. You know what I mean? He really is. And he just loves people.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thanks for telling us your story today.
Of course. No, my honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.